Hello, I'm Delegate Addie Eckert, and I'm here today to interview Senator Andy Harris, who's going to be our next congressman from the 1st Congressional District. Hello, Andy. How are you?
Good to be here with you, Addie.
Thanks so much. Listen, the last time you ran for this election, it was a very close race. And you almost made it, but you didn't. Tell me a little bit more about why now you're running again, when a lot of folks have said that once you get an incumbent there, it's hard to unseat an incumbent.
Well, it is, Addie, but I tell you, the stakes are high in Washington now. I think the average person looks at what went on in Washington and they think it's broken. They think it really needs to be fixed. As I tell folks, you know, my parents both came from communist countries. They came here to seek the American dream, and they got it. They achieved it. I run into a lot of people who think that American dream is no longer achievable. That, in fact, the old idea was if you came here, you played by the rules, you obeyed the law, you worked hard, you succeeded, and you kept the fruits of your success, and you passed it on to your family and to your children and grandchildren. There are people who think you can't do that anymore. That if you work hard and succeed, the government will come in and they will just ask you to pay more and really not have money for your children and grandchildren. Worse than that now, they're borrowing money from our children and grandchildren. They're going to have a debt. Every American right now has a debt of $43,000 to the government. How are we going to pay it back? They need a real change in Washington. So I decided to get back in the race.
Okay, and because that was a close race, you've learned from that experience, I'm sure. What will you be doing differently? And how will you market yourself or communicate your message to the citizens of the 1st Congressional District?
Sure. We talked about jobs a lot in the last campaign. Pretty clearly, the philosophy that's in Washington now, this idea that you can take $1 trillion stimulus bill and somehow that's going to rejuvenate the economy, and the government in Washington picks the winners and losers, decides where that money is going to be spent. It just plain didn't work. They wasted $1 trillion, and our unemployment is higher than ever. And as we both know, the unemployment on the lower shore is among the highest in the state, and there's no end in sight. So we've got to go out and we've got to, again, offer people an alternative. There is another way that you can get out of this recession, and it's not this $1 trillion deficit spending, top-down spending. It's actually across-the-board tax cuts, putting a little more money in everybody's pocket so that they can go out and spend and support the small businesses that in the end are going to be the job creators.
And that's something you've advocated for at the state level as well. And many times we think we're preaching to the choir, but then we also have to deal with the press that may not help us get our message out. How are you going to get that message out?
Well, we have, again, in 12 years in the legislature, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, for instance, has always supported me because they know that I've been a friend of small business, that I have the philosophy that it's not government who picks the winners and losers. The government typically overregulates, they overtax, and they know that my record has been very clear on that. So we have to get out and make sure people know that in this race, the distinction is pretty clear. There's someone who will support new taxes, who doesn't think we have enough taxes, and on the other hand, I think we're taxed plenty. We just have to spend that money more wisely, and we can't spend it. We can't spend money we don't have in Washington, and that's a very different philosophy.
And determine our priorities, very much so. What are going to be the 2 major issues or several major issues facing the lower shore that you would like to see addressed when you are elected?
The economy on the lower shore and making sure that we lose no more jobs and begin adding jobs has got to be the number one priority. As we go through the lower shore, it becomes pretty clear, and folks on the lower shore know that it's poultry, it's agriculture, it's tourism. The 3 legs of the stool of the local economy. The tourism leg is getting better, but poultry and agriculture still are threatened. And they're threatened because there are folks who don't appreciate how important it is to the shore and have taken steps such as the lawsuit against Purdue Industries. The lawsuits like that will drive the poultry industry out of Maryland. If we drive that industry out of Maryland, the farms collapse because our grain farmers depend on that industry, and the whole local economy becomes much worse. We can't afford that now. The unemployment rate's high enough, we can't afford to lose more jobs. So we have to concentrate on making sure that our industry here on the shore and here on the lower shore especially that our industries are firmly supported in Washington.
So give me some specific steps or actions that you would take to begin to put that change into place.
What we have to do is we have to make sure that when we discuss policy that can affect the economy, whether it's environmental policy about runoff from farms into the bay, or clean water, that we involve all the stakeholders, that we have the farmers, the municipalities, the poultry growers, all at the table, all sharing in coming to solutions. And it's not gotcha solutions. It's not, we're going to be confrontational. We're going to take you to court. We're going to do, it's working with them, because everybody who lives anywhere near the bay knows that it's an important resource. It's something we have to preserve. But we have to preserve it all working together. Not working against each other, working together with each other. And that's a very different attitude than the attitude we see now in Annapolis and Washington.
Thank you. Tell me a little bit about healthcare. You're a physician. You've practiced for a number of years in multiple systems. Tell me your sense on where we're going with the new federal healthcare reform.
Well, the healthcare reform bill, I think the American people were right on that bill. They didn't like it, and it shouldn't have been passed. I've been a physician now for 30 years. I've practiced in many settings. I practice, I have privileges here at Peninsula Regional. I practice at Shore Memorial, I practice at Johns Hopkins. I practiced in the VA hospitals, in military hospitals while I was in the Navy. I understand the healthcare system. First off, I think the healthcare system in America is the finest in the world. We have access to the finest medical care in the world. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But when you look at the way you want to improve it, again, I disagree with the way that this healthcare bill, with the philosophy behind it, and I disagree with our congressman's position. His position was that public option is a good idea, that the only thing bad with this bill was the cost. There were many more things than cost bad with this bill. The whole philosophy of the bill, heading toward government-run health care, was a bad idea. It should have been opposed aggressively by our congressman, because the people in the 1st District don't like this bill. And it wasn't, and it should have been, because I think if we had stronger opposition in Washington, by some of the people who eventually voted against it but didn't fight against it, I think this bill wouldn't have passed.
Great, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity that we've had today to talk with you and to hear your views. And we look forward to your race and getting out and getting around and putting some of those ideas into practice as you become our next congressional person.
Thanks, Andy. If people want more information, AndyHarris.com, www.andyharris.com.
Do you have anything else,
Yeah.
just as a PS on this, do you have anything else that you would like to share with the voters before we wrap up?
I think the most important thing that they have to realize in this district, in this congressional election, is they can send a message to Washington. This is one of the few districts in the country where you really can say, you know what, we don't like the way President Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid have been running the government. We're going to send a different team in, because this is one where I will tell you, I will guarantee you I will not vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House. We can't afford her. This country can't afford her. The American dream can't afford her. And this election is where people in the 1st District get to send a message.
Thank you very much.